Kevin Hart's Netflix roast was supposed to be a celebration. One of the biggest comedians alive, millions of fans watching, Hollywood's biggest names in the room. But instead of a celebration, it turned into one of the most controversial nights in comedy history. And the people who were most uncomfortable? Black comedians who watched the whole thing go completely sideways. Today, we're breaking down exactly what went wrong that night through the eyes of someone who has been in those rooms, dealt with those people, and has zero problem calling it exactly what it is. Gina Yashere, British comedian, actress, and someone who has been navigating racist rooms and comedy for decades, just went completely off. And what she said about Kevin Hart's roast, about Tony Hinchcliffe, about the whole situation is something every hip-hop and comedy fan needs to hear. Because this isn't just about one roast. This is about what's really happening in comedy right now. And it's deeper than most people realize. Before we get into everything that went wrong, let's talk about what a roast is actually supposed to be. Because a lot of people watched Kevin Hart's roast and thought, well, that's just what roasts are. That's the format. That's how it goes. But Gina broke it down and made something very clear. A real roast has rules, not written rules, but understood rules that everybody in the room is supposed to know. The Friars Club roasts, the original roasts that started this whole tradition, were between friends, real friends, people who genuinely knew each other, respected each other, and were roasting each other from a place of love. The whole point was to see who could get the best joke in on somebody they actually cared about.
A roast is supposed to, traditionally a roast, like the Friars Club roast, was between friends.
Yeah.
It was friends ribbing each other.
Yep.
And trying to get one up on each other. And for fun, it was based on friendship and mutual respect.
That's the foundation. Friendship, mutual respect. People who have history together, getting together to clown each other in good fun. Now look at Kevin Hart's roast. Tony Hinchcliffe was there. Shane Gillis was there. These are white comedians who have zero personal history with Kevin Hart. Nobody in that room genuinely believed these guys were Kevin's close friends. Nobody bought that for 1 second.
That Kevin Hart and Tony Hinchcliffe hang out. They're not friends.
It seems like those people didn't even belong. It seems like it was hodgepodge together. It didn't feel authentic or, yeah.
It was Netflix putting the hot white guys of the moment on Kevin's roast. And Tony Hinchcliffe.
That's exactly what happened. Netflix didn't build a roast around Kevin's actual circle. They built a roast around who was hot on the internet right now. And that decision changed the entire energy of the night. Because when you bring people into a roast who aren't actually friends with the person being roasted, the jokes don't come from love anymore. They come from somewhere else entirely. And that's when things get ugly fast. Here's the thing that really got under Gina's skin. And honestly, once she said it, you can't unsee it. It wasn't just that offensive jokes were made. Roasts are offensive. That's the whole point. Gina even said she understood that. She wasn't shocked that mean jokes were told about Cheryl's late husband. She wasn't shocked that people went hard. What got her was the comfort level.
So awkward.
That's what I don't like. This is what makes me go, how are these white boys so comfortable?
Yeah.
To be telling these kind of jokes in front of black audience, in front of arguably the biggest black comedian on the planet.
Read that again. How are these white boys so comfortable? That's the real question. Because there's a difference between a comedian pushing boundaries in a room full of people who know them and a comedian walking into somebody else's space and acting like they own it. Tony Hinchcliffe walked into Kevin Hart's roast, a black man's celebration, and made jokes about slavery, made a George Floyd joke, did the kind of material that he does at MAGA rallies and Trump events. And the question Gina is asking isn't why did he do it? She already knows why he did it. The question is, how did he feel comfortable enough to do it there?
So, you know, I didn't like that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I did not like, because it was that George Floyd joke. I don't care. People go, it was jokes. Why can't comedians? But
it was unnecessary. They got mad at Charlie Kirk.
Had nothing to do with that roast.
Yeah.
That's the line right there. He said it because he could, because nobody stopped him, because the room let him feel like that was okay. And that comfort, that's what Gina couldn't get past. Not the joke itself, The fact that someone felt safe enough to make it in that specific room on that specific night. Now let's talk about Tony Hinchcliffe specifically, because Gina had a lot to say about him, and it connects to something much bigger happening in comedy right now. Gina actually knew Tony before all of this. She used to see him at the Comedy Cellar all the time, and she said something that should make everybody pay attention.
No, I know Tony Hinchcliffe.
Yeah. I know.
And Tony Hinchcliffe was never like that before. He was never like that before.
Yeah, I did.
He wasn't. I used to see him at the Cellar all the time.
Yeah.
These white boys are just doing this race because it makes money now. That's what's in right now. This is the political climate we're in.
Yeah.
And all these mediocre white male comics who were getting nothing before has suddenly become Joe Rogan friggin' sycophants, and are now switching to this right-wing racist comedy because
This is the key point. Tony Hinchcliffe didn't suddenly become racist overnight. What changed is that racism became profitable in comedy. Look at the timeline. Look at what's happened in the last few years in the political climate in America. A certain type of edgy right-wing humor started getting massive audiences. Joe Rogan's platform blew up. Certain comedians figured out that if they leaned into that lane, they could go from playing small clubs to selling out arenas almost overnight. And Gina is saying Tony made a business decision. Whether he truly believes everything he says or not, he saw which way the wind was blowing and he followed the money.
That's what
There's a lot
elevates
of comics
them.
switching over to that.
That's
we
what
knew were
elevates
not
them.
like that. Yeah.
Look how Tony Hinchcliffe has gone like this.
Yeah.
From switching to that kind of comedy. And it literally is just a money move. It's just a business move. Whether he's truly a racist or not.
Now that's a layered take, because she's not even saying Tony is definitely a hardcore racist at his core. She's saying something almost worse, that some of these guys are performing racism because it pays. They're doing it for the algorithm, for the clicks, for the Rogan bump. And when you open that Pandora's box, when you normalize that kind of comedy for money, you can't control where it goes.
But now the Pandora's box has been opened.
Oh yeah, it's like.
And, and now they feel vindicated. They feel...
They're like.
They've been emboldened. They've been emboldened.
No doubt.
And so, these white comics who kept their racism under wraps are suddenly like, now I can say what I really feel.
That's the real danger. You can't close that box once it's open. Now here's where the story gets personal. And this part of what Gina shared is something that hits completely different from the roast conversation. Because Gina isn't just talking about Kevin Hart's roast from the outside. She has spent her entire career navigating exactly these kinds of situations. And she has the receipts. Chelsea Handler, Chelsea Lately, one of the most talked about comedy shows of its era. A show that could literally launch careers. Joe Coy blew up from it. Lonnie Love was a regular on it. Gina's manager told her, you need to get on that show. It'll open doors in America. But Gina watched the show first, and what she saw made her uncomfortable. She noticed how Chelsea and the white male comics treated Lonnie Love on that show, calling her fat, disrespecting her, talking to her in a way that Gina felt crossed the line.
I didn't like it because they're always calling her names like, oh, you're fat and you're this and you're that. And I know that they were friends and whatever, but I just found it distasteful that the way, and Chelsea would do that to Lonnie, and then white male comics who were guests on the show would then start disrespecting Lonnie.
But she went on the show anyway, and she went on with a plan. She told herself, nobody is going to disrespect me on this show. I'm going to come in, do my jokes, be funny, and not give anyone a target. And then Chelsea walked right past her in the hallway before the show. Didn't say hello, didn't acknowledge her, just walked past like she wasn't there. Then the cameras turned on, and Chelsea's first move.
So we get in front of the camera. As soon as the camera comes on, she's saying things like, well, welcome to our country. I mean, you can go back and find the episode.
Wow.
She kept saying things like, welcome to our country, and saying stuff like that. And I was like, I see what you're trying to do, Chelsea.
Oh, she was trying to rage bait you?
But I'm not doing it.
She was rage baiting you?
I just aimed all my jokes at the audience. I go, ha ha.
Welcome to our country, to a black British woman who speaks perfect English, who has been performing comedy professionally for years. Chelsea was trying to bait her, trying to get a reaction, trying to make Gina look like she didn't belong. But Gina didn't take the bait. She turned to the audience and just killed it, directed all her energy at the crowd and had them laughing the whole time. Producer came off stage after and said she was great, said they needed to get her back. Next day, different story entirely.
Same producer goes, Chelsea didn't understand her accent.
What?
That's what the producer said to my manager. Chelsea didn't understand her accent. And I was like, but I did my jokes.
In front of her.
I got to the punchlines, the audience laughed.
Chelsea didn't understand her accent. A woman who has been doing comedy in America for 2 years. A woman who speaks English, British English perfectly clearly. A woman whose audience laughed at every punchline she delivered. Chelsea didn't understand her accent. That's the excuse they gave. And Gina never got invited back to Chelsea Lately again. And then Gina went somewhere even darker, because Chelsea Handler was just one moment in a career full of these moments. And Gina talked about something that happened years before Chelsea, something that stayed with her body even after her mind forgot it. Paul Provenza, a comedian she used to see in England before he got famous in America. They were backstage at Jungler's Comedy Club, a chain that literally paid Gina's mortgage for 5 years she worked there so consistently. Provenza was having a conversation with a white comic, and he said the N-word. Gina stopped him, calmly, respectfully. She told him she'd rather he not use that word in front of her, that she found it uncomfortable.
So I stopped and I was like, Paul, I'd rather you not use that word in front of me. I find it uncomfortable and I really don't want to hear that word in front of me. Paul got in my face like this, stood over me. It's just a f***ing word! And he shouted it in my face.
What?
And there were 3 other white comics in the room.
Damn.
And none of them did anything. Just spat my, and he shouted it in my face. It's just a word. And he shouted it in my face 3 times.
Wow.
He stood over her, shouted it in her face 3 times, and every white comic in that room stood there and did nothing. That's the moment. That's the room. That's the reality that Gina and so many black comedians have been navigating for their entire careers. She was young. She was new to the game. She got up, left the room, did her set, and told the booker to never put her on a show with that man again. And then years later, when her manager called to say Paul Provenza wanted her on his show, The Green Room, she didn't even consciously remember why, but her body remembered.
And I'd forgotten about that incident, but my body, when I say my body just went like this, and I went, no, I don't want to do it. And my manager was like, but why? It's The Green Room, it's a nice little comment. And I was like, no thanks. And I'd forgotten why, but I immediately reacted to it. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that show. And I never did The Green Room. And it wasn't until 2 years after that I went, oh, that's why I didn't want to do The Green Room.
Right.
Her body remembered what her mind had filed away. That's what trauma does. That's what years of navigating these rooms does to you. And that's the thing that connects everything. Gina talked about Kevin Hart's roast, Chelsea Handler, Paul Provenza. These aren't isolated incidents. These are patterns. These are rooms where certain people feel comfortable doing and saying things they should never feel comfortable doing. So let's zoom out and connect all of this, because Gina wasn't just venting. She was pointing at something real. What happened at Kevin Hart's roast didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a specific moment in American culture where certain people feel more emboldened than they have in years. Where racism in comedy has been rebranded as just jokes, where pointing out something as racist gets you labeled as too sensitive before the conversation even starts. Gina has been in comedy long enough to see the cycles. She knows what it looked like before. She knows what changed, and she's saying clearly what's happening right now is different. The Pandora's box is open. The people who used to keep it under wraps don't feel like they need to anymore. And the real victims of that shift, black comedians, black artists, black people who just want to show up to a celebration for one of their own and instead have to sit through jokes that make them feel like they don't belong in the room. Wanda Sykes turned down Kevin Hart's roast. Chris Rock turned it down. These aren't people who are scared of edgy comedy. These are legends who looked at the lineup and said, no thank you.
But I would not, if I'd known that Tony Hinchcliffe was going to be on that roast, I would not have been. I mean, Wanda Sykes turned it down, and I'm sure she did.
Chris Rock, Wanda Sykes.
Yeah, because I'm sure they were like,
turned it down.
You got Tony, you got the guy that was at the MAGA KKK rally.
Yeah.
On this roast.
And
he's
go there.
That's the line. MAGA KKK rally. That's how Gina described the event where Tony did his material before the roast. And she's saying that guy should never have been given a platform at Kevin Hart's celebration. Full stop. Kevin Hart made a decision that night. And that decision has consequences not just for him, but for every black comedian who now has to navigate a comedy world where that kind of content just got a massive mainstream cosign. Gina Yashere has been in these rooms for decades. She has dealt with the Chelsea Handlers. She has dealt with the Paul Provenzas. She has sat in green rooms and dressing rooms and backstage hallways where people showed her exactly who they were. And she's still here, still talking, still calling it exactly what it is. What happened at Kevin Hart's roast was bigger than one bad night of comedy. It was a signal, a sign of where things are right now and where they could go if nobody says anything. Gina said something, and a lot of people in comedy needed to hear it. Drop in the comments, do you think Kevin Hart made a mistake letting Tony Hinchcliffe on that roast? Or is this just comedy doing what comedy does? Like and subscribe, because we're just getting started.